Good morning, everybody. This is Memo Valverde with London Foster Realty. We're going to be getting started in just a few minutes. We are going to be doing a London Foster professional training today, as we do most Mondays. Today, we have the pleasure of having the incomparable Miss Nanette Davidson Jackson. She's going to be giving us a presentation on leases. The name of the training is How to Do a Lease and How to Do It Right. We are just about to get started. And I just want to welcome everyone. I want to remind everybody who is a London Foster agent that you can look this training up on www.londonfoster.net under education. And there is the presentation there. And we're going to be adding this video so that you have access to both. That being said, let me put these glasses back on and let everyone in the room. And we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to be doing a presentation today about leases. So Nanette's going to be giving a presentation on how to do a contract to lease and also how to do an actual lease. This is an excellent presentation, and Nanette has given it several times. She is the master of contracts and leases, so we are very, very fortunate to have her.
Thank you. Thanks so much, everybody. I'm going to start out today just by welcoming everybody once again. Just as Memo said, we're going to go through the contract to lease and the lease transaction today. If you need to find this, you can go to londonfoster.net and you pull up the login for Miami Realtors, and then you go to training and it's under lease transaction. So you'll see it there. So welcome everybody, and we do have, if you have any questions, just let us know as we go along in the question area. So first of all, people are always asking, why do we do the contract to lease? The contract to lease is done because this is your first opportunity to offer on your property that you're going to do for your client. So it's your first impression. It's very important. So you want to make sure that when you do the contract to lease that you find your information correctly. The first thing you want to do is find the parties from the MLS. You're going to find the parties of the lease to contract to lease by going to, scroll down here, sorry. I'm going to scroll down. So I'm just going to go over the slides as you'll see them, and you should be able to see those slides as we go along. So the purpose of the contract to lease is twofold. It's to make your offer to the listing agent and to work out the details prior to the lease. So, and to confirm our broker commissions. Since on the actual lease, there's no place for the commissions, this is the place where your commissions are confirmed. So the contract to lease is very important, and you always want to make sure that you do it. It's only 3 pages long. It should take you just a few minutes to do the contract to lease. Again, you can find the contract to lease on either londonfoster.net under our forms, or you can find it on Form Simplicity, and it's labeled contract to lease. So we're going to work on the contract to lease first. We're going to go over, and first of all, you want here, I just told you where to find it. When you're touring the property for the first time for your client, or your client is with you, you want to make note of all the property contents in, like the appliances, window treatments, etc. So all those things will be noted on your contract to lease and also on your lease. We have an example here of a listing, and you'll see everything that's included in the property. Here we have, there's no dishwasher here. So you have a microwave, you have stove, you have the refrigerator. So all those things would be listed, obviously. If there's a washer dryer, you want to make sure you put the washer dryer on. If there's blinds, you want to make sure you put the blinds. If it's furniture, usually when there's furniture, we do an additional listing of all the contents, and I add it as an addendum to the actual lease. But again, this is contract to lease we're talking about. To look up the proper owners of the property, you want to go to the folio number here. So each MLS number will have a folio. You can click on that folio number and it'll bring up the tax record, either Broward or whatever county that it's in, Broward or Miami-Dade, and it will show you the actual owners. If it's 2 persons, like a husband and wife, for instance, you need to list both of those people on your contract to lease and also on your lease, exactly as they're written on the tax roll. You always want to go by the tax roll because it's the legal, shows the legal ownership of the property. If it's a corporation and you want to list it again as the corporation, usually it'll say the company and an LLC on it. If you do want to find out who the person, and the agent should know who the legal person who can sign the contracts are there. So, okay, so that's where you find the information. We're going to move on down to the actual contract to lease. So again, I mentioned that it's three pages. In this example, we have Sarah and Mar, which is the LLC, and this LLC has one person to sign. So when they do the initials, you'll just have the first box. Sometimes if a person has never filled this out, they get confused because there's two, but this is if there's two owners, for instance, husband and wife, et cetera, then they have two places for people to initial. Same thing with the prospects are here. So the owners here and the prospects are here, landlords here. So if there's only one person, you only utilize one of those slots. So I'm going to scroll back up just to show you here, to continue with the information here. So you always want to make sure when you're filling out the document that you get the first month's rent for escrow in a cashier's check or money orders. As London Foster, we don't accept cash and we don't no longer accept personal checks. You want to make sure it's a cashier's check or a money order for the first month's rent. Somebody asked me last week about getting a deposit, a security deposit as the first, instead of the first month's rent. And we never do that. And the reason is because the first month's rent is actually belongs to the brokers, and that's usually your commission, whether it be a half a month or the 5%. You always want to make sure that you get the cashier's check and it is for the first month's rent. You make a photocopy, always make a photocopy, or, you know, with your phone, you can take a photo with your phone. So always make a photo of that cashier's check just in case for any reason it doesn't make it to the bank or something, you know, slows it down, or you need to look for it and they have to look for it at the office. So you always want to make a photocopy for your records. Along with the cashier's check, you're going to get the photo of the tenants, their driver's license or their passports. Obviously here in Miami, we have a lot of foreign tenants and leasees. So you want to make sure that you get their passports if they don't have a driver's license. So Memo talked a little bit about the escrow. So if you have the card, you can deposit the first month's rent with your card easily at Wells Fargo, to any Wells Fargo. Again, this is the first month's rent, but it's also the escrow for this. You always want to make sure that you put the property address in the left-hand corner or somewhere, note on your deposit when you do it on the check, the cashier's check left bottom, where you put the property address or the client's name on it, usually the property address. Again, after you do that deposit, after 1 day, you'll be able to ask for the escrow letter online. And again, it's at londonfoster.net. On the first column, it says escrow, and you request the escrow letter for that client. It's very simple. I think there's 5 questions on the escrow. So it just leads you right from one to the other. It asks you for the tenant's name. It asks you for the broker's name and the property address and your name. Okay, so here we go. Again, it's 3 pages here. It's pretty easy. We have on here the first month's rent, which you see here, first month's rent. We have the last month. If you have a last month, most of the people right now in Miami are doing, or in Miami and Broward are doing 2 security deposits instead of the first and the last month. So this is where you're going to record that. So first month's rent, and this is for the month of July. This security deposit is 2 months rent, and that they're giving that at the move-in. So, and here we have a pet deposit. So on this one, we did have a pet deposit here. If you have anything else down here, any other amounts of money that are due, like sometimes people might do 3 months up front, 6 months up front, this is where you would put that. So if you have other, and you put additional rent or future rent, you could record it here. So it would be put here, and usually all the rents except the first month are usually due at the walk-in or when you do the walkthrough of the property and the move-in. So here we have the amounts here that are checked off for its month's rent. This is the total for the whole year. And this is the tenants will be paying monthly on the 15th of the month. And most apartments now, most properties here, homes are no smoking and no pets. Well, there is here a pet. Usually on most of the condos, it varies from single family homes, but usually the water, sewer, trash removal, and sometimes the cable, you want to check the MLS listing, and you also want to recheck with the agent to see if the cable is included. So that's where you would write here on number 9. Number 10, usually the responsibility of the tenants are to change the AC filters and the light bulbs, and anything else you would put here. If it's a single family home, they may be responsible for lawn maintenance. They may be responsible for the water. They may be responsible, sometimes with single family homes, the water is not included. So you want to make sure that you check on those things because it can be significant for the tenants if they have to take care of those things. But this is where you basically want to spell out. And remember, your contract to lease is your offer. These things may come back and the agent may come back and these things may be negotiated, but this is basically your offer. Again, any additional terms?
No, excuse me 1 second. They're asking, is there any way you can make your presentation full screen instead of
I'm sorry?
Is there any way you can make the presentation full screen?
Yeah.
They were asking, so they can see it a little bit bigger.
Yeah, let's see.
And Ashley, your question, if there's going to be more.
Is that better?
Yep, that's a little bit better. Yep.
I also want to remind everybody, this presentation is available online, so you can follow along by going to londonfoster.net under education, under lease training. This presentation is there for you, so you can follow along with Nanette. If you can't see it clearly, you can have it open on your computer.
Okay, thank you for that. The association approval, number 11, and usually it's $150. Again, all this information, you can extract it exactly from the MLS listing. It's usually printed there. If not, you can ask the listing agent this information, but it's usually on your MLS listing. So on this case, it's $100. And usually it's within 3 days and the tenant's responsible. It's always non-refundable. An association approval is always a non-refundable amount. That's to do the background search. Any additional terms here can be written. Sometimes on additional terms, and for example, maybe if the tenant has to give or provide personal property insurance or renters insurance, that's where that be added under section 12, or if there's any additional terms of things they have to take care of in the apartment that are not listed above. So you can always add things to that. But again, this is your offer. This is to spell out what you want to happen on the lease. This is your opportunity to present you and your tenant's wishes for the apartment. Remember, the lease is generally done by the listing agent. So this is your opportunity to add your input. Of course, there's here for the background. There's some little information here for the background check. If it's not acceptable, obviously they can, the landlord generally refunds the deposit. If for some reason, either the background check shows something that they're not able to do the apartment, or the landlord doesn't think that they're able to pay the rent, et cetera, from their financials, if their credit score is too low, then that amount of money that's in escrow will be given back to the tenant. So service members obviously get a break here. So they have a comment about the service members, just like they do on our leases and on our contracts. Failure to perform. So this is a legal document. When they sign it, it is a legal document. And that's another question we always get. But yes, this is a legal document. So the tenant generally has to perform accordingly on here and should not back out. If they do back out for any other reason other than they fail to qualify for the apartment, they usually forfeit or will have to forfeit that escrow deposit to the landlord. So we want to make sure that everybody knows this is a serious part. They do sign, and it is a legally binding contract. So you want to make sure that the tenants are on board with everything that you put on here. Review this before you send it. Obviously, go over it with them if they need to have you to go over it, and make sure that they know that it's a legal document, and they do risk their deposit if they try to back out, if the tenants try to back out. So let's move on. Let's see here if there's anything else. Obviously, this is pretty self-explanatory here. You have their signatures, initials on all the bottom of the pages. Make note that here, there are initials down here. For some reason, when people sign here, they forget to do the initials here, but make sure that it's done. Landlord's address should be on all the documents. Tenant's address should be on all the documents. Okay. So, accepting the offer. Now, this is basically for if you are the listing agent, so you need to make sure that you sign and initial the bottom of every page. Like I said, that page 3, make sure your initials are on there. Double check your information and verify the dates of the lease start with the move-in dates. The reason we bring this up to verify the dates is because you want to make sure that if you put a date for the lease to start, for instance, it's on a Saturday or Sunday, that the buildings allow Saturday and Sunday move-ins. So you always want to coordinate, look at your calendar and verify the dates. Sometimes people always put the first of the month, but if the first falls on a Saturday or Sunday and they can't move in on that date, then you may want to move it to the Monday so you don't lose those 2 days of the tenant's funds, basically. And always remember on any lease or contract to verify the date of the last signature if there's any changes, and that's your effective date. Okay. So now we're going to head on down to the Florida leases. Again, the leases, all our documents are found on our website on londonfoster.net under forms, or you can use Form Simplicity. The leases are 19 pages, and this is the Florida legal lease that we use. Some offices vary and they have their own version of their lease, or they use an outdated one. We at London Foster make sure we use all the latest ones that are done if there's been any changes. And you always want to make sure you're using the most updated. Sometimes, again, you'll get one from, for instance, Keller Williams, I think, has one that they use their own. It's a legal document at the same time, but you want to make sure that you read it carefully because it varies a little bit. Some companies vary a little bit from the normal Florida lease. But be careful. If you have an owner that has multiple properties, sometimes they have their own lease and it can be very restrictive, and it's usually owner heavy, basically. And so you always want to make sure that you're cautious when you're reading owner leases, and it's not the Florida residential lease that we're used to using. Let's see. When you're uploading your documents, after you get the contract to lease done, you want to go to londonfoster.net and upload it under My Deals. And again, it's a very easy site to use. And there's a few questions. It just asks again for your name, for your license number, I think, for the tenant's names, for the other agent's name, and the commission structure under My Deals. So after you get the contract to lease signed by everybody, you upload it, and then you wait for the listing agent to do the lease. If you get a chance to do the lease, if the listing agent says, sure, you go ahead and do the lease, it's to your advantage always to write your own lease, because you can write your lease basically for your client and basically get more of what your client wants on it. They're all very similar when you're doing them, but you can tweak it a little bit in favor of your client if you get the opportunity to do the lease.
Nanette,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interject real quick. Linda Barnaby is asking a very interesting question, which is, can a realtor assist the owner if a lease is over 1 year?
No. The answer is just no.
I mean, everybody knows the answer to that.
This is the thing.
You know, we always try to, but yeah, the answer is actually no. You cannot. As a licensed realtor, we are only permitted to do one lease at a time, 1 year at a time. So the answer is no. If a lease is over a year, there must be an attorney involved. There must be an attorney involved in order to create the lease.
Right, or the owner can do it if it's an owner property and the owner's acting as their own agent. They can do it, but honestly, can you do it? The answer is no, you're really not supposed to. And if you can consult, if you have any questions about that, the legal hotline, and I'm sure they'll probably tell you the same thing. But the legal answer to that is no, you can't. And you cannot also, even though there's, you can, if your owner has signed, if you represent the owner and they've agreed to a renewal on your listing agreement, you can get a renewal of the commission if that owner originally asked for it. If you don't have on your listing agreement with that owner that you can get paid a renewal on it, then you cannot get a commission on that property either. So that always comes up. People think that they automatically can get a renewal if that tenant renews his lease, unless when you originally listed the property with that owner and that owner signed off that they will pay for that, then you legally can't take that commission on that unless they legally said that you could when they listed the property with you originally. So you want to be careful about that. And any leases for more than 1 year can legally be written by attorneys or owners. That's the answer to your question right there. We always put this on here that everybody must be 18 years older to enter into the lease. I think that that's probably not a problem so much as it used to be. But anyway, you just want to make sure that this happens sometimes with students. You know, we get down to the University of Miami or some of the college areas where you may get somebody that's under 18 years old, you know, who's a student, but generally their parents would have to be put on the lease. If you have anybody who's a student or anything, university or for whatever reason, you do have to be 18 years old in the state of Florida to enter into a lease, and mentally competent. Mentally competent goes to—
Nanette, I'm sorry to interrupt you again. Somebody
Yeah.
asked another great question, and unfortunately the answer is also no. But somebody just asked the question, where is it in the contract in order for you to do a renewal?
What's that?
Somebody's asking.
On the listing agreement. On the listing agreement. On your original listing agreement. What?
No. She's asking on the actual lease if there's a place to do a renewal.
No,
I think that's what she's asking.
Yeah, we don't have, because
we don't.
renewals are not done in Florida because
Correct.
you can either do, if it's written for 3 months, if it's written for 6 months, or a 1 year, you know, forever how many months it's done, but we cannot do leases. You have to do a complete new lease if it's more than 1 year. We don't have such a thing as an addendum for a renewal. We don't have anything like that.
She's asking about the section. I'm sorry, you were right about the listing agreement.
Mhm.
There's a section for the renewal. So yeah, it's in there. Do you know can you look it up real quick and let us know the line for the section? And then in regards to Yvette, Alcoba is asking, I received 3 contracts to lease yesterday. How do I present to the owner? All 3 at the same time? Absolutely. You should not be showing any preference. It's not your property. If you have any invested interest, you have to reveal that. So absolutely, if you have 3 offers, you have to present them. Unless you have it in your contract to lease that it says that once a lease is executed, you don't have to continue showing anymore.
Right, and that's on
Can the
also on your
realtor write
listing
the 2?
agreement. We probably should have gone over the listing.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Give me just 1 second. Linda's asking again. Linda, the answer is no. You cannot do a 2-year lease. A realtor, a licensed realtor in the state of Florida is only permitted to do 1 year leases, 1 year at a time. So in other words, if your client says, oh, but I want to guarantee, absolutely not. They'd have to get an attorney. You'd have to get an attorney to write a contract, and therefore you're not doing the contract. The attorney is. If they want an addendum that says that they won't raise the price next year, that's a different story. But in regards to a lease, you're only permitted to do 1 year at a time. Sorry, Nanette.
Yeah, and
It was just getting
that
a little bit confusing.
Yeah, that does come up all the time, but you know, the legal answer to that, and you have to watch yourself because you just do, you know, this is a very legal place we live in Florida. Every other person you talk to is a lawyer. You just have to be very careful about this stuff because you can be fined for this if somebody finds out about it. You can, you know, it's just not a good idea to get in the habit of doing that. So just write a new lease. What I do with mine, I have multiple properties that I have clients for many years, and I do 60 days for the most part on the leases. We put 60 days that if they're going to renew or not on all of our leases. I have a calendar that I use personally for myself, and I know 60 days out that the property at 2101 Brickell Avenue is going to come up in 60 days for renewal. So what I do, I contact the tenant, because I put the tenant there in that property. So I contact the tenant. I say, do you need to give us notice if you're going to extend your lease for the next year? So and they say, yes, I'm going to, or no, I'm not. So I find out, I contact the owner. I say, hey, 2101-1705 is going to renew another year. I'm sending you the new lease to review. I write the lease, and if we raise the price, you can raise the price if you want to, but there is a limit of raising the prices. I think it's like, what, 10% memo? So you can't raise it too much. But anyway, like this year, we kind of went down with COVID on some of my leases. But anyway, you can do 60 days before. I lock it up, and I get the tenant to sign it 60 days before. I get the owner to sign it 60 days before. And I make sure that my listing for that property too is renewed. So that listing of that property has to be renewed, because I might have only had a year listing for that property with my client. So I make sure that in order to secure and protect my commissions on those renewals, you write a new lease, you write a new listing agreement that you do have the right to rent that property by that owner, and you just move forward. But you always want to keep a calendar of your leases that you put people in, and if it's renewable or not. If you represent the owner, it's very important. If you're on the other side, if you've represented the tenant in some cases, it should be on the MLS listing if it's renewable or not. Down on the bottom of the page of our MLS listings, it'll say renewable commission. Or the lease may be renewable, but the commission may not be renewable. So you want to always check the listing on the MLS to see if the lease for your client, for the tenant, is renewable. But also for your purposes, if you want to get that commission on it, the commission has to be renewable too, which means the owner is willing to pay you a commission on it. Most owners do not give renewable commissions, but it depends on the client actually. So, but that's with your listing agreement. It doesn't have anything to do with the lease here, or it doesn't have anything to do with the contract to lease. So let's move on. This is a really important, since we brought up all these legal issues, this is a really important part here about the non-lawyer disclosure. The other day I got a lease from a guy, I can't remember, a contract.
Nanette, sorry. Were you able
Yeah.
to tell them what section of the listing agreement it is? Because it's section 6C as in Charlie of the listing agreement for rental. It's called the listing agreement, the leasing listing agreement. Give me 1 second. It's called the exclusive right to lease agreement, and it's section 6, letter C, which clearly states what the renewal terms are. So that's where you make sure that you include it, okay?
Right. And again, if you do your listing for only 1 year, and remember that if your lease is for 1 year, you need to get a new listing, and there is a change form for that same listing agreement also. So if you do a change form, you don't have to fill out the listing agreement again. You just do a change form with the date changed, and maybe if they're changing the price of the listing, then you change the price of the listing to if the price is going to increase or decrease. So there is a change form for a listing that's also on London Foster under forms, or it's also on Form Simplicity. So these are things you should be, if you're a listing agent, these are definitely forms you need to be very familiar with. And this can be just extra money. I mean, it's money that you really don't have to work for too hard, because if the client is happy in the apartment, if they're renewing, if the owner is happy with the tenant and they're renewing, this is just extra money that you're going to get from all those renewals. And some people do very well off of their renewals. They automatically have the owners to give them a renewal for the commission. At the same time, if you put a person, and this is a side note, but if you put a person in a property and help the owner to put that person in the property, you want to make sure you touch base with that person all year long. So you're actually, being a part of the issue and that they know who you are. You just don't want to stick them in a property and forget you ever knew that person. Touch base with them from time to time, a text or an email or something. Say, hey, hope you're still enjoying the condo. Hope you're still enjoying the property, just touching base so they know you. And also, as another side note, that person may want to look for a house to buy if they're just here for a year or so and they love the area. They may turn into your client, the tenant, maybe your client to buy a property sometime. So it's a good idea to always touch base with those people, especially if they do want to buy a property or if they want to renew, so they know who you are. We were talking about some legal things that you always want to put this on here. I received a contract to lease last week in a lease, and the guy said, oh, that page is not necessary. We don't need to sign the non-lawyer form. You do. That's why the state of Florida puts it there. It's definitely mandatory. It's part of the lease and should always be there. So your name goes in there, and it's pretty self-explanatory, but you're not an attorney. It's explained to everybody you're not an attorney. The agent explained how he can only fill in factual information, he or she, and you can't tell the person what to write on there. So the other big thing, again, with Florida, because we're a multicultural area, multilingual, I can read English. And that needs to be on there because all the legal contracts that we do in Florida, even though we have copies and other for people to read, the legal ones that we sign are all in English. So they have to read this, that they understand what's on there. And if not, it was read to them by this person. So to protect yourself from being any problems legally, you need to have this as part of your contract. And it is a part of the contract. State of Florida says it is, and you should always use it. And sometime, one day, if it hasn't ever helped you, it probably will someday help you get out of a situation where the tenant said, hey, I didn't understand this, but this is saying, hey, I understand. So it keeps you legal, basically. Okay, so here we're going to go over the actual lease. This is a residential lease for an apartment. So you guys realize we have two different leases that we're allowed to have. If it's a single family home, you have a completely separate form. So if you're renting in a condo, this is the one to use. There's another one that is for homes. And it basically, with single family homes, the biggest difference between condos is to do with what's included and what's done. For instance, in a single family home, they might have to pay for the utilities completely separate, being the water, and that's the biggest one. If they have a washer dryer in it and the water is there, if it has lawn sprinklers on it, they're paying for that. They're maybe paying for lawn care, and some landlords don't pay for the lawn care. They have the tenant to do it. So that's basically how these things vary. Is the responsibilities that the tenant would have to pay. But we're going to go over, for our example, for the one with the condos. So again, we talked about the number of months here. So we're doing this one for 12 months. If you have 3 months, 6 months, whatever, that's where this goes. And you always want to make sure, I want to point out here that this one started on July 15th. So if it's for 1 year, it's going to end the day before. So you have the 15th and the 14th here. And again, sometimes you'll see somebody putting like July 15th and July 15th. That's actually not accurate. So you'll want to do 1 day short to include the 365 days. Again, this is a corporate. So on this contract, it would only need the signer of the corporation to sign on the legal lease. And usually they have one party. If you ever want to check this information in Florida, the website to check is sunbiz.org. And to verify, number one, that the LLC is an active LLC. If it's not an active LLC, it's not a legal contract, basically. So you want to make sure that they do have an active LLC or license, or if it's a PA, whatever it is, if it's a corporation, you can check out if it's active at sunbiz, sunbiz.org. And it's the state of Florida. You just put the entity's name in there, the LLC's name, and you can do a check to make sure they're active. And then also on that same form, you can look to see who the primary signer or the legal signer is, to make sure that's who's going to sign and initial your contracts. So you want to verify that information. Okay, so here we have all this information. Sometimes I get these and all this is blank. You never want to have this blank. So all this needs to be filled in. And again, because if there's ever an issue, if for any reason, and this is who, if you have to go to court for any reason or anything else, all this has to be on here, because this is the way you contact people. You don't want to, their email address, their phone number, even though that realtors may have this information, it's important that the owner and the tenant have this information. Always want to make sure that you list the apartment number. And here, for some reason, they have the name of the apartment condominium here. So you always want to list that on here. Contents here. If there's anything else, if it's furnished, again, sometimes if it's a lot of stuff in there, you can write in C attachment for furnishings, something like that. If it's like 100 items or 200 items in the apartment or in the property, you want to list all that stuff. You never want to leave it blank. And it says right here, list all furniture and appliances. If none, put none, or the premises. Okay, here we talked about the information comes straight from our contract to lease, and it gets put on this area right here. So the tenant will pay installments of $1,500 on the 15th of each month. So here, if you have in Florida, and especially in Miami Beach, which and also in Fort Lauderdale, if you have short-term rentals available, like we do have several properties on the beach here and short-term rentals, they charge taxes. And the listing agent will put these taxes here. So they might have a tax here, and this is where you list that amount. Again, if it's shorter, 3 months, 6 months, it's here. If it's 6 months in a day, usually we don't have any taxes, but if it's less than that, there may be these taxes that are included in their rent payment. So that's where you would put that. Again, this lease is 19 pages long, and I'm going to scoot over here. Page 2. Okay. One of the important things I mentioned, don't leave blank boxes. You never want to leave it blank, because after it's signed, people could always come back and write something in that's not correct. So I personally either write in the dates or write in the numbers or write in 0. So I never like to leave anything blank. So just a good idea and a good practice, I think. Pet deposit here. It's always controversial here, pets. So you always want to make sure if there is a pet, you have check the pet boxes. Smoking, the same thing. You always want to check the building too. If you get the information from the listing agent, should have the information for the building with pets and smoking. Sometimes in Miami, there's now non-smoking buildings. So definitely you don't want to put a tenant who's smoking into a non-smoking building, but you want to check the policy and the rules and regulations for the building regarding the pets and the smoking. Okay. This is pretty much alterations. You know, if they hang up pictures, things like that, this is where you would check that information. Disturbing the peace here, that's on there. Maintenance. When you get to the maintenance on condos, for the most part, this is almost always going to be very similar information. Smoke detectors are their landlord's responsibility. Sometimes people put batteries for smoke detectors for the tenant, but normally if you rent an apartment, the owner should put in, or the agent makes sure that there's new batteries in the smoke detectors if they need batteries, if they're battery operated. So the landlord's responsible for smoke detectors, though in the state of Florida, it's illegal not to have them. So it is the responsibility of the landlord to have smoke detectors in the apartments. Extermination, that can vary. So sometimes the tenant's responsible, sometimes the landlord. The building has a policy. That's something you can check with the management or with the landlord to see if they know. Sometimes the landlords are maybe in a different country, or they're on a different part of the country here. Always check with the building just to see if they include the building extermination. Sometimes the landlords are not familiar with those rules, or that rule may change since they bought it. So always check with that. This is important right here, locks and keys. If you've ever been awakened at 4 o'clock in the morning from somebody out partying and they've locked themselves out, and the realtor, you get a call and you say, hey, I'm locked out, can you bring me a key? The answer is no. If you just do this little X right there, the tenant's responsible for locks and keys. This means lockouts too. So generally, you always want to make sure that the tenant's responsible for this, so you're not getting those 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock a.m. calls. Obviously, in a condo, again, this is dealing with a condo. Outside of the building, garbage removal. Almost always the garbage is the responsibility. It's included in the landlord's maintenance. So the garbage removal, trash removal receptacles are landlord. Running water is yes. Unless it's a townhouse, townhouses sometimes have the water responsibility as the tenant. So this is something that might vary if it's a townhouse or a duplex or something where the tenant's responsible for water. So you always want to make sure if they're responsible for their own water, then you want to make sure that you check this, and it's not landlord. You don't want the landlord to come up with an $800 water bill at the end of the lease because it was the tenant's responsibility, or a water shutoff because the tenant didn't pay. So always make sure. Hot water just has to do with a hot water heater. That's almost always, it's an appliance. So it's anything that's an appliance is usually the landlord's responsibility, especially, again, we're talking about condos here. In a single family house, it may be different. There may be a washer dryer not included, and that would make a difference right there. Again, we're talking about here condos. The lawn generally is included with the landlord in a condo. Heating, if they're heating, you want to check to make sure, if you're the listing agent, if the AC unit has heat connected to it. In Miami, a lot of them don't, for purposes of fire. They don't have a heating element in it. So you always ask the owner if the AC unit also has a heating element in it. But anyway, this would be heat. Air conditioning is usually always the landlord. Furniture, if it's furnished or not. If it's furnished, then you would obviously check landlord. And if it's unfurnished, you would check tenant. Appliances, generally, again, this is for condos, generally always the landlord. Fixtures, this means light fixtures. Sometimes you can include the curtain rods, things like that, fixtures. Anything that's affixed to the wall is here, landlord, or fixed to the ceiling. The pool, if there's a swimming pool, if it's a community pool, landlord. If it's not applicable, it would be neither person. So this again is if it's a townhouse with a pool or a house with a pool, then you would check the pool here. Again, usually if there is a pool with the property of a house or a townhouse, usually the tenant is responsible for filters, but usually the machinery and equipment is landlord. So this could be broken up here, and you need to specify that. If there's anything other, you could put it here. For instance, if they're responsible for just the filters and not the equipment, you would make that note here under other. Heating and AC filters are almost always the tenant's responsibilities. And I also write this on my walkthrough form that they're responsible for light bulbs, heating and air conditioning filters, and they need to change them usually once a month here, or as they, are dirty. And I usually show them as an agent. I just say, hey, here's the AC, here's a couple of extra. If you want to put them, the owner puts a couple extras there just to make sure that that gets done, because it's to make sure it runs accurately and doesn't have a problem. In Florida, you definitely want to make sure they're changing those air conditioning filters. Here we just put light bulb filters. Other things that might be put here might be tenant personal property insurance in effect. So you put that here. And light bulbs, AC filters are already here, so that's already connected here. Anything else, if you have a single family home, or the lawn, if the lawn is the responsibility, there's a thing up here for lawn, but any other things here in a single family house, this is where you would put those things. All right. There's usually major maintenance or major replacement that costs no more than $200. Now, this Price can vary here. Some people put 0, some people put $175, some people put $200. It depends on the property and the value of the property and the value of the appliances that are there. So, and it's usually put here as a deterrent, and you put it here to make sure that the tenants know they have to respect and take care of the appliances and not, destroy them or not, work them inappropriately. So it's usually, if there, it's usually a deterrent for having them to call the owner with every little tiny thing. So this one, we have $200 on it, and that's usually pretty much standard, but everybody might have their own standard major maintenance. If you have to call, for instance, if you clog up a food disposal and you clog it up, you may have $175 for, if it was your fault as a tenant and you stuck everything down the food disposal and you clogged up that food disposal, usually you're going to get charged $175, $150 just for some plumber to come and look at it. And that would be your responsibility. If the motor has broken or something on, the refrigerator stops, if the stove stops working, if the microwave stops working, that's a different issue. And that can be worked out individually with the owner. But this is basically, again, as a deterrent and to make them take responsibility for not tearing up some of the property and the appliances. Again, that price can vary depending on the contents and the appliance costs in the apartment. Approval contingency. The association, generally, this information should be here that any application will be paid by, it should be checked tenant. So it's almost always the tenant responsibility to pay for the application fee, and it's almost always 100% non-refundable. And that application fee is basically, they do the background check for financials. They do a criminal background check everywhere. And now, since we had COVID, most everybody is doing an eviction search to see if these people have been evicted. And that most everybody now is acting on the application for the previous landlord's contact, and they're verifying that they did pay their rent through COVID, or that they made some attempt to pay it, and they want to make sure there's no evictions on it. So this becomes very important. It's always the tenant generally paying this. Very few times I've ever had a landlord pay for that. So it's generally the tenant will be paying for that. So you check tenant. Tenant agrees to use due diligence in applying, and tenant shall pay the security deposit. Some buildings, especially more luxury buildings, require a common area deposit, and that's what this is pertaining to. So sometimes the landlord has that placed for the tenant, but it comes out of the tenant's security deposit if there's any damages done. So that can be either landlord or tenant. Sometimes the tenant pays it. It's in addition to any other security deposit. So this would be the association's security deposit for common area. They commonly call it a common area deposit. It's for damages of, if they have a pool table, if they have the pools, a movie theater, things like that. So they usually have a common area, and it's generally 1 month of rent. So for instance, if the rent's $2,200, that common area is usually $2,200. So here's somebody asked about the renewals. This lease can be renewed or extended by a written agreement signed by both landlord and tenant, but in the event no total lease shall exceed 1 year. A new lease is required each year. So it can be renewed. A new lease is required for each year. It can be extended, but a new lease is required for each year. So somebody asked that question a while ago. This is your answer right there. A new lease is required for each year. Let's see. Lead-based paint, if it's before 1978, if it's then you have to put the lead-based paint warning in there, and there's also the lead-based paint pamphlet, and all of those things are on Form Simplicity, and they're also on londonfoster.net under our forms. So this just explains the lead-based paint. On this section, if you, for the most part, if the owner doesn't know, this is usually you need to check A or B, but not both. So lessor is the owner, has no knowledge of lead-based paint in the housing, and you put it here. So if they know if there's something and they can write what it is, but it's been taken care of and, you know, or painted over, or if it's been remediated, then you can put this information. But for the most part with lead-based paint, in most cases, unless the owner knows they're lead-based paint, this will always be your choice. And this will be the lessor is the owner or landlord. So you would have the landlord or owner to initial here. Or if there's two, you have initials here, initials here. Let's see, leasee is the tenant. So it's not consistent, I don't know why, but anyway, the tenant is the leasee, the landlord is lessor. So they have, again, the information listed above. This pamphlet is on Form Simplicity, and I think it's also on our londonfoster.net. So you need to, they need to check, the tenants need to check here or here. You as an agent, check here. And this is only if it's before January 1978. If it's after that, you don't necessarily have to fill out this part. And this is important for the state of Florida, so they make you get, remember, leasee is the tenant, owner, landlord. Agent, listing agent, and the selling agent. So here, again, initials at the bottom of the pages. If there's two people, one person, if there's only one. All right. This is the most important page to me of the whole lease. We have a lot of people in Florida that breach their leases, leave early, try to move out, take off. This is the page 7 that is very important and should never left blank. So early termination fee, liquidated damages. The reason that we generally take the first month rent and 2 months security deposits goes to this page. This says, I agree as provided in the rental agreement to pay $3,000, not to exceed 2 months rent, as liquidated damages or early termination fee if I elect to terminate the rental agreement. And the landlord waives the right to seek additional rent beyond the month in which the landlord takes possession. Now you can go over this with your client and explain to them that if a tenant just walks out, you can get up to this 2 month, and he would already be holding, if you took 2 months security deposit instead of a last month, then they would already have, the owner would already have this in his account, in his escrow account for the property. So you'd already have up to 2 months. Remember, this lease we're doing here was $1,500. So the 2 months is $3,000. So this is important. If your owner doesn't want to litigate, doesn't like to go to court, doesn't want to pay a lawyer $375 to do an eviction, then if you're owner of that mind, this is where you would check this box. If your owner is a lawyer, their son is a lawyer, their brother is a lawyer, they're a lawyer, they may like to litigate, and they may want to go to court, and they may want to litigate. So this, if you want to litigate, the landlord may seek damages. This thing, may seek damages, is litigate as provided by law, which means you go to eviction court, or you fight for the liquidated damages for early termination fee. So it gives you a right in Florida to litigate. And this is the page that does it. It's page 7, very important. So if your person, your owner landlord is a person, like I said, who likes to litigate, this may be the one you want to check. Most landlords, might want to just take the $3,000, relist the apartment, and rent the apartment again. This comes into play if you want to litigate and go after damages and sue them for the remainder of the lease and the funds. If your building has rules that you can only rent once a year, this comes into play. If the building does not allow, for instance, if a tenant's been in there only 2 months and you have 10 months left on a year lease, you know, there's, and it's a nice rent, he may want to go after and litigate and get the tenant to pay the remainder of those 10 months. And this is where that section would apply. So you could litigate if you wanted to. There's no guarantee that they would get that money, but if you have a strong lease, this is checked here, and everybody is the understanding that if they break their lease, that they can be litigated against, then this is the box you want to check. For the most part, though, if the building allows them to lease the apartment again if somebody breaches or moves or transfers their job, or for some reason, they, other things, not eviction, job changes, etc., then they usually just take the 2 months and they move on and lease the apartment once again. But this is very important that everybody signs here. You can't just check the box and not sign. You want to make sure that everybody understands this. Is a very important part of the lease. To me, the most important part. The next pages, so this is page 7. The next pages up to 19 are the landlord rights and tenant rights. So this just explains everything that we've gone over, the tenant rights. So you want to review these. We don't have them here, but you do want to review these and go over them. This tells you what to do if you're on a month-to-month. If you're on a 12-month lease, it tells you all the information that you need. If the tenant wants to break his lease, it gives the tenant information. If the landlord wants to go after that rent we were just talking about, it tells you how to do that legally. It has to be done by letters that are signed, and they have to be certified mail. It goes over all that information. So you do want to be familiar with this, but there's nothing there to fill out except for the initials on the page. They're not optional. You cannot leave them out of your lease. They always have to be there. And on the bottom of every single page, you have to get the initials on it that they've read it, and that they're aware of what could happen if anything goes south in a lease. For the most part, if everything is smooth in your lease, you're not going to have issues with these. But if it does go south, these pages are going to be very important to you. So please read over them. And if anybody has any questions about that, it's really simple. It explains all the lines of our lease. So it's worth reading and going over it with your clients. If you are the listing agent, or if you're the agent should provide the tenant and the prospective tenant with the HOA and the management information. So it's usually always posted at the building on a bulletin board by the mailboxes. So you can ask the listing agent this information, and they should have it and be able to share it with you. You need it to get the rules and regulations. I usually get the rules and regulations before I even do the contract to lease, because for instance, if they have a dog, if they want to have something different, I always get the rules and regulations to go over with my clients, just to make sure this is a building that they want to live in and it's not too restrictive for them. So they also have pet information there. They have all kinds of stuff, pool hours, guest rules and regulations, other things. So the listing agent should be able to provide this, but if you can't find it, just go to I said, like where their mailboxes are. There's usually a information there that lists who the managing people are, and a phone number or an email address for those people. It's usually on a bulletin board where the minutes may be, or the notes for the building by the mailboxes somewhere. So after you get your lease done, your executed lease, after everybody signs, everybody initials, you have to give this information along with the application to the condo association. They do not need to lease. You don't have to send that. London Foster does need the contract to lease. It does need to be uploaded. So you upload to London Foster My Deals under our londonfoster.net, and you put the contract to lease, and you put the lease there, the executed lease. Again, for the most part, HOAs are just like London Foster. I think everybody right now uses cashier's checks for the application, or a check. Again, find out if it's an old-fashioned HOA, you have to do that stuff in person. So you want to work out if you have a tenant that's a foreign tenant or not here, you're going to have to work out somehow for them to put the money in escrow or something to get that money sent. Or they can work out something with the HOA, how they get it for foreign people who get their cashier's checks. Or they may do Venmo. Some of them might do other electronic means if they're not, if it can't be dropped off at their office. So each association has a different policy. So you just need to check with that homeowners association to see how that's paid. You always want to follow up with the HOA management office. Again, if you have a contract, if a lease, it's to your advantage and your tenant's advantage. Some of these HOAs may only meet once per month. So depending on when you want to move in, and they usually vote on, or at least interview, some of them interview people, you want to put all that on your calendar to make sure you're doing all this timely and you're not getting your tenants in a situation where they need to move and they're not approved yet. You have to have an approval before you move in. You have to upload that approval to London Foster too. You can never move a tenant in unless they're approved. It would get everybody in a lot of trouble, and the tenants may get kicked out and the owner may get fined. I once had an owner move somebody in 2 days before. It was a weekend before their lease started, and they fined the owner, the building fined the owner 2 months or 2 days of that rent. And I think it was like $600 they fined him for the tenant moving in 2 days early before the approval. So you want to upload all that information, like I said, to londonfoster.net under My Deals. And we're almost there. This is important because this affects your commission. So this is really important. At least 4 days prior to your tenant move in, and this is the tenant, we have the lease already, contract to lease has been uploaded. 4 days prior to the tenant move in, you must request the escrow. So if you are the listing agent and you have that escrow at London Foster, you request the escrow be sent to you, or you pick it up at the office. So you can take the other agent's commission, if you're the listing agent, to the walkthrough. So you never ever want to give a commission to an agent before the walkthrough. Because what if the walkthrough didn't happen? What if something delayed it? What if, for whatever reason, you always take your check to the walkthrough with you. And the walkthrough is also very important. So we have our walkthrough form 2 for the tenants. We have one for houses listed on londonfoster.net, and we have one for condos. So again, give yourself plenty of time, especially if it's on a Monday that you're going to do your walkthrough. You need to have those checks in your hand, I would say by Friday before the Monday move in, if you're moving in, because the office, you may not be able to get it on a Saturday or Sunday, but at least 4 days, protect yourself and protect your escrow money. You need to make sure that you get it in there in a timely fashion. Here's what I was just talking about. Checks cannot be dispersed, deposited, or cashed prior to your walkthrough. Verify the date and time of the walkthrough with the agents and the tenants, and make sure that everybody knows when they're going to be there. If you have the tenant, if you're bringing the tenant, make sure that the agent, the listing agent, knows that you are going to do the walkthrough and you will expect to receive your commission check at that walkthrough. So, and do that again, like 4 days before, if you can verify the date and time, which gives that listing agent, in case they forgot, or in case they forgot to request the check from their office, need to make sure that they get it there, and you get your money and your commission at the walkthrough. Remind the tenant to bring the last month's security checks. If there's a 2-month security, then they'll have to be either the cashier's checks or money orders, no personal checks. We don't deal with personal checks. We don't want to have to chase after somebody if we have a check that doesn't clear. So you always want to make sure it's a cashier's check, and make sure that they know whose name is supposed to be on that security check. Again, if it's an LLC, you need to make sure that the check is written to the LLC, or if it's the person who's able to sign, you need to make sure that they can actually present that check to their bank some LLCs don't have bank account numbers, and they have the name of the person who is the verified person who can sign on the account in that name. So it may be a different name on that. So you just want to verify all that information on whose name and who should the agent or who should the tenant write that security check to. Some owners want the money directly deposited into their bank account, and that's the way they want their tenants to pay their rent. I personally take the first 2 months because, again, we don't want that check to bounce on us or not to go through. I almost always ask for a cashier's check or money orders for the owner's security. Almost always. I do not let that get directly deposited, and that varies from agent to agent on how comfortable you feel with that. But if you ever have that happen to you where for some reason those 2 months, the security, you've let them move in the apartment with the first month and that security did not clear, you're going to be in a little bit of a trouble because they'll have a tenant in their property and they won't have any security check. So I always get that at my walkthrough in a cashier's check. That's just a personal note. The listing agent must receive the tenant security pot last month and before handing over the keys, fobs, etc. It's a legal issue to ever give keys or fobs or access to an apartment before the lease starts. And if you do have a situation where the owner, the building approval has been done and you start before the date on the lease, please edit your lease. So you always want to make sure you edit your lease because it could be a legal issue if the person gets in there, something were to happen. Heaven forbid you have a water leak before their lease started, you'd have a fire, you'd have something go wrong, something missing from the apartment before that lease started. You always want to cover yourself and verify that the date that you give the keys and fobs are the legal date that's edited or written on your lease. So again, if there's an early move-in possible, you edit your lease. Cover yourself and cover your client and cover the owner by making sure that the dates all correspond to the walkthrough. And the walkthrough date will be on the walkthrough form. It'll be signed by both agents and signed by the tenant or the owner. So if you sign for the owner, you put your name for the owner on the walkthrough form. So, but just make sure it's dated properly at the date before you give the keys, before you give the fobs. If the owner wishes for future rents to be deposited, I usually give that bank account information at the walkthrough. I just hand it to them. I don't like to put people's personal information, bank information out there to the public. So I usually just hand it to them or write it on their walkthrough form when I hand them the walkthrough form that they signed. And I give everybody a copy of the walkthrough form or I email it to them, take a picture of it and email it to them or take my laptop and email it to everybody right there on site. So, so everybody has a copy of the walkthrough and they understand. You can actually write on the walkthrough to any other rules and regulations of the apartment. So you can, there's a place on the walkthrough form where you can write additional information. On the walkthrough form, just as a note, make sure that you check all the appliances. You check to make sure all the toilets flush. You make sure that the shower works. So just give it a good once over on the walkthrough to make sure if there was any kind of repairs or painting or anything that had to be done from when you first saw it and it wasn't done. They usually have a few days to get that done, but it should all be done by the walkthrough. If not, make a note, take pictures, take a video of anything that is broken, scratched, tile broken, window things missing, anything that's not working or something, put it on the walkthrough and make a note to both agents that this will be either the tenant's not responsible for this thing that's broken or that it will be fixed by a certain date and get a date that it'll be fixed. Always remind the agents and the tenants to contact the utility companies. We have FPL here, so it's usually the biggest one. And this is at move in and move out. So you always want to make sure that the utilities are transferred properly. You exchange the keys, fobs, etc., and you pick up your check. Again, for your commission request, you go to londonfoster.net. It's really easy under My Deals. And usually you'll get an immediate response when you put the commission request in. And you just have to give the type of the transaction, sale or rental. We're talking about rentals. Title now doesn't apply here because they don't take our escrow. That's just for sales. Is London Foster holding the escrow? If they're holding the first month's rent, then you put yes. How did London Foster receive it? If I'm handing it or if I deposit it at London Foster, I put that there. How do you prefer to be paid? At London Foster, we can be paid immediately by electronic transfer check. It can be deposited right to your bank account. So that's information you can sign up on londonfoster.net on how you'd like to get paid. So I usually get paid by a check for some reason, and then I just deposit into my own Bank of America account. So who did you represent? All this information just walks you through it. This is the questions that I ask when you're asking for your commission. Who did you represent? Buyer's name. What's that?
Ms. Nanette, we have a couple of questions that you're going before you go too far into that.
Okay.
a couple of questions that people ask. Give me 1 second because I'm driving. So they said, how do I effectively collect the application fee? We provide a service under londonfoster.net under vendors. This is basically a soft credit check. This is something that you would want to use when I would recommend mostly when it's an individual home. This is not something that I would necessarily recommend for a condo, because condos are going to do criminal checks and credit checks, and they're going to require a police report and that sort of thing if you're doing it through a condo. But when it's an individual owner, the idea is that we provide you with a service that it's $50. You share the link with your tenant, and your tenants can fill out the form. They pay for it themselves. They'll send the report to you. So that is what that is. The next one is, I sent a contract to Lease a week ago. My question is there a limited timeline to get an answer? I mean, you know, if you made me an offer to rent my listing and in 2 days I haven't answered you, I'm assuming it's because I have a better offer.
Yeah, the correct answer to that is 2 days. It's 48 hours.
Yeah.
So that's generally the given time, unless it's extenuating circumstances that somebody's on a cruise ship or somewhere in the mountains on an alpaca that they don't have internet or something. So, I mean, in this day
at which
time,
point the listing agent would let you know that. They would tell you,
Yeah.
listen, this is going to take a couple days. You know, don't freak out if I don't have an answer for you in 24 hours, 48 hours. But yeah, if you sent somebody something a week ago, I would have already called and checked up on it, because that's suspect. Or it may be, and more than likely, with the market as crazy as it is right now, it's that the person got 5 different offers, and they're not, you know, jumping up for joy that you gave them a contract to lease. You know, they went with someone else, and that just shows you know, we could go into for an hour presentation on professionalism. You know, when you get an offer, when you get a contract to lease, you should respond to everybody, yay or nay. It's not the end of the world. No one's going to cry. No one's going to die. But, you know, some agents are just lazy and they just simply don't do that, but they should.
Right. That's good information. So one of the things I do right now, he mentioned we are in such a competitive market right now for rentals. There are no properties. I had a property I couldn't give away last year. This time last year, I could not give this property away. We dropped the price. And I put it up on last Sunday. On Monday, I had like 10 offers, 7 people showed up, and 5 over price. We raised the price. And I had 5 full price or more offers on the property. So the professional thing to do, if you're the listing agent, respond immediately. Just say, I received, and it just has to be a text. Thank you for the contract to lease. I received your offer. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. As soon as possible, legally on our contracts in Florida are all 24 to 48 hours. So 48 hours being even if it's going back and forth on a contract or a price or something, you're supposed to give them 24 to 48 hours to get back to you. Because remember, it goes from you, it goes from the tenant to you, and then from on the date they signed it, and then it goes to the other agent. She might sleep on it, and then it goes to the owner. It depends on the agent, and if the agent is a responsible person. In Miami, it depends on if the person works weekends or not, or if they have some mental thing where they don't think they should work weekends. So, I mean, it's a personal opinion.
A couple more questions. James asked the question, how soon can a tenant renew for a contract to lease? A tenant doesn't so I don't understand what the tenant will be renewing a lease, not a contract to lease. The contract to lease is a pre-contract. It's basically the tenant telling the tenant agent telling the landlord's agent, these are the terms under which I would like for you to create a contract. So you don't really have to renew that. If what you meant to say was how early can someone renew a contract, it actually states it there on the contract, and normally it's anywhere from 2 to 3 months before the lease expires. Obviously, if it's a short-term lease, you know, it could be up to a week. but it's terms that both parties agree to. In other words, if you have a lease for a year, you're not going to wait until the last week to let the owner know that you're not renewing. You usually do it 2 or 3 months in advance.
Yeah, on the actual lease, it's in the state of Florida, it's 60 days on most of them.
Yep.
Some people on their actual lease will put 30. So it depends on what their lease that they sign says. It's all that's some tenants want 60
but like
days.
Nanette very eloquently told you guys earlier. Listen, if you're getting a renewal, guess whose responsibility it is? Yours. 3 months before, you should be calling that tenant, or you should be calling the owner and saying, listen, we're gonna find out if this person's renewing, because I'm gonna make another month's rent, first of all. And if you're not, and that person is leaving, then guess what? It's the perfect opportunity for you to get a listing agreement out to that owner, because guess what? He's gonna want to rent it right away. So that's your responsibility. My advice is put it on your calendar, set an alarm so that you know exactly what's happening. So yeah, on the lease contract, it varies, but usually it's 2 to 3 months. And then someone stated something that wasn't true, and I can't remember where it is. Oh my God. T. Bernie, my understanding, London Foster does not do ACH direct deposit. Wrong. We do. All of our agents can get paid any number of ways. You can get paid through electronic check, which you print out at home. You can get paid through direct deposit, or you can pick up a physical check.
One note.
Can we clarify that? I'm sorry, can we clarify that? Because I just spoke with the woman at the office a few days ago last week, and she told me no, that there's no direct deposit. It's coming soon.
I don't know. I don't know who wrote that to you. Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah, please check that, because it was only just a couple days ago that I spoke with the young lady that answers the phone. Because when we're in our commission request thing on the system, it says direct deposit, and I clicked it, but I realized you guys had never collected direct deposit information.
Yeah, there obviously is there's obviously a miscommunication there. What you probably meant is that because you have not signed up for it, you can't do it. The way you sign up for it is you go to londonfoster.net. Under Office Manager, it says ACH. You have to fill out some paperwork, and it takes around 6 to 8 weeks for it to be implemented. Once you're implemented or in the thing, then they have the option to do it. Because unless you filled out all the paperwork and they verified it and they worked it out with the bank, they can't just send you a direct deposit. Okay.
Oh, right,
so
right. I wish you told me that. Okay, I'll do that. I wish she told me that. And then
have you attended a London Foster 101?
Yes,
Which, by the way,
I have. And you
2.
were great. And
well,
I
went over it. Bernie.
Okay,
yes, because
let's move on.
I go over it.
Let's go on. Let's move on. Any other questions?
Okay.
Okay, so as I've mentioned the walkthrough.
I have a question. I'm sorry. And I couldn't, for some reason, my chat is not working.
Okay.
First of all, thank you so much. It's been great. I really appreciate this presentation. I have 2 questions. The easiest one is when I do a renewal for a second year, meaning on the listing agreement, as you said, can I be greedy and get all the money for myself and not give anything back to on a second year to the buyer's agent if I have the listing?
Unless that agent has on the listing on the MLS, if you have that, you're talking about
I'm the listing agent, right?
You're the listing agent on your thing.
The answer is no. The answer is no. The answer is no. The answer is no. That's unethical. The answer is no. If the original lease states
you can't get both sides of it.
Shared,
you can only get that because your listing agreement said that you can only get 3% of it, or half a month or whatever.
Renewal, and again, I want to get away from the word renewal because that's not true. Florida does not allow renewals. What you are allowed to do is create a brand new lease for a brand new year with the same old tenant. But if the tenant came in through an agent and you paid them a commission, and on your listing agreement, original agreement, you cannot take both sides, because basically what happens, remember, we are not independent realtors. We're not brokers. So what happens is you just put your broker in a liability issue in which imagine if it was you. I don't know who's speaking because I can't see it, but
It's
imagine
Maurice,
if that was
but I understand. I got it.
yeah. Imagine if it was you and I cheated you out of a half of my month, and you find out about it, I don't know, a month, 6
Well,
months,
it's not a
7
matter of
months later.
cheating. It's a matter of not
Yeah, whatever,
disclosing.
whatever. Well, I didn't give it to.
The
Well,
same thing.
that's an ethical issue, but no.
Okay.
The answer is no, and the reason why is because you put your broker in a liability issue. Your
I
broker,
understand.
you could then sue my broker.
I understand. Now, the second question, I think it's much more topical. Section 8 has become now a protected class, if you want to say that. I have a landlord right now who I work with, who wants to get rid of a Section 8 tenant only because they haven't done anything wrong, but they're very difficult to work with as far as getting access to a unit or anything like that. And he just wants to tell them that he's going to have family moving in.
How
I'd
long
like
is
to
the
know-
lease? How long are they in the lease, and when does their lease expire?
The lease will be expiring in 2 months.
Okay.
It's a
so
it's a fourplex, so there are other tenants that are not Section 8.
Okay, the correct thing to do, so you don't get into problems, there's a letter on Form Simplicity that you can send to them, 60 days. If they had a 1-year lease, they're not on month to month, right? You said they have 2 months
That's
left.
correct.
So right now, look at a calendar, find out, get their lease. They have to have an actual lease. Read the lease first. If it's a lease, a Florida lease, this is what the Florida lease states. That this is in the Tenant and Landlord Acts, those pages I talked to you about. So look at it. It's called a landlord non-renewal of lease. And that's the form that you need to do. It's a non-renewal. So all you're doing, you don't have to give a reason. You don't have to do anything. You just put, and do not say that their family's moving in. Do not say anything is done. And don't repeat what you just said to us to anybody else. So, because it's discrimination. And right now you have to sign on every time you do Form Simplicity and this Miami Realtors has a non-discrimination thing that you have to sign on right now before all of our contracts. They're really big on this. You got to be very, very careful legally about this issue. Just do a non-renewal of lease, which means anybody that he's just not renewing. That's why we don't do long-term leases. And that's why the state of Florida doesn't do long-terms, is exactly for this. It's why you should always have a lease and never let people do month to month because of this issue right there. You get somebody in there, they trash the place, it's dirty, you don't like them, they fight with everybody, they cause problems, the police are always there for any reason, not
You have to have a reason.
Well, but if you have any reason, the landlord can always do a non-renewal, but it has to be sent out properly. It has to be, you have to follow their directions. They're right there in your tenant lease rights on how to do it. It has to be a letter of non-renewal. It has to come straight, not from you. It comes straight from the owner, has the owner's address on it, the tenant's address on it. It has to be sent through the mail, certified letter. It's right there.
From your memory, do you have to state a reason?
I can go over it with you personally, and I'll go over it with you so we don't take up more time, but no, you don't have to put a reason.
Great.
So
Thank
you just check a box. You check a box that says non-renewal of lease.
Got you. Thank you so much. And again,
I forgot where it is in the contract, but in the contract, it actually states that the owner has no obligation to renew.
Right.
When the terms end, and they have no obligation to renew. They don't have to explain to you why. And that's one of the few protections, because usually, leases protect the tenant. So this is one of the few protections that they have for the landlord for exactly that same reason, is because sometimes just two people just don't get along. Let's forget about whether they trashed the place or, or they were bad at payment. Sometimes the landlord doesn't like the person that's living in his investment. And so
sometimes
they say,
the landlord does want their family to move in there, and they have a person they like and they want for any reason.
Right. For whatever reason, that the landlord is under no obligation to be forced to keep someone there. And that's only in the state of Florida. I'll tell you, I worked for New York for many, many years. In New York, it's the opposite. Possession means 9/10 of the law. Once you're in, it's
And get
so
them out.
hard to get someone out.
Yeah.
In Florida, it's very different. You
And
don't
that's the
pay.
reason we do leases and we date everything, but you do need to follow the directions, Maurice, very closely and be very careful. And don't mention that conversation to anybody else in that community.
Of course.
Yeah, because
Again,
they'll tell everybody.
I've been at this for like 20 years
Oh,
and I thought
yeah.
I knew everything. And thank you. You've taught me a
Every
great
day
deal.
there's something new, man, every
Yep.
day.
Thank you.
I want to say a couple other things. I talked about this walkthrough thing. On the date of delivery to tenant is when the tenant moves in. The date of delivery to landlord is when they move out. So if you're the listing agent, you did this same form. So you want to use this same form. Clean in is the day they move in. Clean out is the day they move out. So you use this same form keep it in your records for that apartment or that condo or that house. And this is the one that you use when they move out, if they move out. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out on our form. And there's plenty of lines in there. I always take photos and videos of anything broken or damaged, and make sure everybody gets a copy of those photos of the damage. You make sure as the listing agent that everybody gets a copy of the actual lease that's an executed lease, because sometimes people do the electronic and they never get to save the one, especially the owner might not have the one the agent sent it to you signed, but you have to send a copy of that to your owner so it's executed. Usually have the owner sign first and the tenant sign second. But anyway, make sure everybody gets full copies of the lease, full copies of the contract to lease, and full copies of the walkthrough. So make sure everybody gets a copy. And if there's a contents list, make sure everybody signs off on the contents list as you're walking through. If I have a furnished apartment, everything is listed, and I go over it at the walkthrough and show the tenants everything, and they sign off every page of my contents list. They initial it, and that becomes part of my contract, and the contents go with it, and it's signed and dated by the tenants when they move in to know that everything is there. So you have this form that you use when they move out, and you have that contents list if it's a furnished apartment that has been signed by them, that all those items were there the day they took possession. So anything else anybody has? I'm sorry we went over time. We always do because we get
Yes,
questions.
I do. And I'm sorry to monopolize the time.
Go ahead.
I'll make it very quickly. On the 2 months that if the tenant leaves, the damages, it doesn't mention anything about the security deposit. I always put it in
30 days. So the owner, on that question, if your question is how long does the owner have? If you have to tell right away when you do the walkthrough and there's damages for it, is that what you're asking? How soon they have to give a damage deposit?
If the tenant wants to leave before the contract is over and there's 2 months liquidation, it doesn't mention anything about the security.
What do you mean? That is
Hold
the
on,
security.
because it's two separate things.
Right.
The way that it works is like this. The deposit is meant for damages. The deposit is a security that you are giving, that you are going to be turning in the apartment in the same exact state in which you received it. The penalty that you speak of happens to also be 2 months. So let's say two separate scenarios. You have a tenant who got a new job, he's moving to Chicago, he can't be living here anymore. He wants to pay the penalty of 2 months to be let out of the lease. He must pay that penalty up front. And when and if the property is returned in perfect state, he will get the 2 months deposit back. People think it's a wash. Oh, it's the same thing. It's not the same thing. You must pay the penalty up front. And if the property is turned in and it is not in perfect state, then from the deposit that the owner was given, whether it be 1 month or 2 months, then the owner can say he has 30 days, like Nanette said, to send out a list of things in which they find wrong. Oh, well, you know what? The water heater was broken. You broke all my lamps. There was 3 tiles that I had to get fixed. Whatever it might be, he must send it to them itemized, explaining to them why he's going to reduce that from the deposit before returning the deposit within the first 30 days. But they're two separate things. People get confused by that because they think, oh, the deposit is meant as the penalty. No, it's not. The deposit is meant on the physical apartment or the physical home, and it's a security to make sure that you are going to return it the same. The other mistake people make is they think that the deposit is for bad rent. In other words, oh, I didn't pay my rent for 2 months, take it from my deposit. It doesn't work
Never.
that way.
You never, ever,
your
ever
deposit,
want people to take a rent and
Yeah.
pay the rent from the security. Because what if they?
because all of a sudden, yeah, because then they pay up, right, the next month, and then now you only have half a month security, or you
or
have one, you don't have
none,
security
and
anymore.
you have damages, and then you have no security deposit. But you should
Exactly.
never, you can never use the security deposit for commission. Never, ever, ever. That's always comes from the first month's rent. So you can never use a security deposit for that. Security deposit actually belongs to the tenant. The owner is only, and the landlord is only holding that money until move out in case there are damages. So remember, that money is there and you cannot use that money. So that money.
And the only thing I can add to that, and I tell you, because I've been doing this for the past 3 years, and Nanette was the one that turned me on to this, is that I no longer ask for first, last, and 1 month's deposit. I ask for first and 2 months deposit.
Right.
And the reason why is because that way, first of all, the owner gets 12 full months of rent. Okay, instead of, oh, the last month I don't pay, first of all. And second of all, nowadays, if you have a $1,600 condo studio in Miami Beach, and that person damaged your washing machine, I mean your dishwasher, those cost $900. So where's the rest of your deposit? I mean, $1,600 or $2,000 is not what it used to be. And between, paying for repairs or things, and especially if it's a furnished property.
Right. There could
Nanette,
be.
there's a bunch of questions in here. I just saw this.
Thank you so much.
Can we move on,
I just
please?
wanted to ask
Guys,
a question about move out. If you're representing the tenant side, do you need to be at the move out? Because what I typically do is I set a reminder and then I send the prior form from when they moved in, and I send the photos and videos I did take from being at their move-in, but I give it to them because if there's a renewal or move out, supposedly we're not supposed to be involved.
There's no hard rule about that. Most agents never follow up with those people. They rent them an apartment and they shut the door. They're out of there. So you're a good realtor if you're following up on that stuff, to me. But you can be there and do whatever you want. I mean, you don't have to be there. But I never.
It's not a bad idea to go. It's not a bad idea to
had,
go just because it's customer service. It's a way of getting in the face of a tenant and a landlord, and them remembering your name. When you have a weird name like Memo, you want people to have a good impression, not a bad one.
Yeah.
That's my advice.
There's no rule that says you cannot be there. Absolutely no reason you can't be there. But, it would just be, if you're finding them another place to rent or, staying in touch with them, finding them a house, it's a good way to keep touch with people. Because honestly, most people do. As soon as they rent it, I never see that agent. I never even see the agent. Sometimes they don't come to my walkthrough to walk in. Some of the agents don't. They just leave it on the listing agent. For me, that's fine because I just take over their client because they've just dumped them. They dump people in your lap. So you're a good agent if you're following up with people, I think. Because most agents don't. What other questions, Memo? Where are we with questions, Daniel? Memo, what other questions?
Sorry, give me a second. No, I think that was it. Good info. The devil's in the advocate. Can we move on, please? What is her name? Her name is Nanette Davidson Jackson. You
can give out. I'll give out my phone number. I mean, if anybody gets stuck or you need help filling something out, if you want just a second pair of eyes on it, I'm available. I do that a lot for people. My number is 305.
There was another. Give me 1 second, Nanette, because there was one last question about the direct deposit. Is there a cost? This is my recommendation. Look, the electric checks, you can print them at home, deposit it with your phone, and they're immediate. The problem that I have with ACH is simply that it takes a lot more to clear. Instead of taking the traditional 2 to 3 days, it takes 6 to 7 days to clear. So that's the reason why I don't use it. There is no cost for ACH. There is a cost for a wire transfer, and that's $35. And Nanette, I'll go ahead and I'll share your phone
My
number
contact?
on the chat.
Yeah, my
And,
phone
Is there a
number.
cost for direct deposit?
No, I just went over that. There is no cost, but it takes longer for it to clear. The
Okay.
ACH is direct deposit. I don't like it. I did it once and it took, I think, almost a week for it to clear versus a normal 2 to 3 days that my bank does. And depending on your bank, my bank gives me, I think it's like 60% of the check the day I deposit it with my phone. And then the rest, they give it to me the next day because I have enough money saved up there. So that's kind of their terms on me. But in regards to the ACH, it took almost like, I think it was like, I don't want to exaggerate, but I think it was 7 working days. So it was like a week and a couple of days. So I was like, man, this is stupid. What's the point of getting direct deposit?
Yeah, because it has to go from
That's
Wells
just your
Fargo
bank.
to your bank. So it's
Yep.
crazy.
That's just your bank. That's just, every bank has its own, glitch or their own thing or their own precautions because, it's your first, maybe it was because it was my first time. Maybe it's quicker. I don't know if anyone has done it and it worked out better. But for me, I love the electronic check. It's easy for me to print. I print it at home. I take out my phone, and if the deposit is less than 10,000, it allows me to do it with my phone. If it's more than 10,000, then it does require for me to go and do it at the ATM, which again, it takes 2 seconds.
My phone number is 305-588.
I put it in the chat.
9381. Okay, thank you.
Okay, 588-9381. Yeah.
Any other questions? Anybody?
Bueno, if nobody has any more questions, Miss Nanette, again, couldn't love you anymore. I thank you
guys.
for your
Thanks
time.
everybody for your patience.
I thank you
and
for
your time.
being such a great part of our team and always helping us out. Getting a bunch of thank you, Nanette's great meeting. I want to reiterate to everybody who's in here, this training is available on londonfoster.net under education. All you have to do is just look up the lease training. And I'm going to go ahead and get started in 20 minutes on this same channel, this same link with the London Foster 101. So if there is anyone who is not a London Foster agent and you would like to attend, we'll tell you all about London Foster, how to make 100% commission, how to join our team, what the value added is. If you are a London Foster agent and you missed it or you haven't been in it for a while, there's always new stuff that comes up. So I welcome you to join us also. Again, it's going to be on the same chat. So I'll close this one off. We can just rejoin in 20 minutes. I look forward to seeing you all. And again, Miss Nanette, thank you so much. I don't know if Bobby was able to log on. I know he had a meeting. But on behalf of Bobby and Daniel and myself and everybody else on the team, we thank you. It's just awesome to have you on our side and having all that information which you share. Nanette will be doing another training in a couple of months. We'll be doing the as-is contract, which is also one of her strong points. So look out for that, guys. It'll be on
I want to
the
say
London
something,
Foster
please.
Sure. Who's this?
Okay, so hi everybody, I'm Yvette. So I wrote a MLS listing for rental, and I wanted to share this because I didn't know and I was freaked out. So I was looking at previous listings in my condo, and one of them I put in there under broker remarks tenant, like the link for what the association makes you go to do their background check. Anyway, I got a $500 fine from the MLS because that's against MLS rules. So I'm letting you know so you don't do it. Anyway, I got it waived because it was my first time. It's not going to happen again. But I thought I'd share that because it was so scary.
No, thank you. But yeah, it's very important for guys, for everybody, for ladies and gents, for you guys to remember there's a reason for it. And it's because the same information that you're listing in the MLS, they share it on the internet. So basically what you did was it made it visible to the end user. So all of a sudden, it's like, I'll give you an example. And this is something that happened. I'm not going to say her name because if you know her, you know her. She's on our team and she went out and got pictures. She stole them from somebody else's listing. instead of taking them herself. And then the way to cover it up is she covered the MLS number and put her business card on it.
Oh my God.
Very clever, very clever. But what happens? She uploads it into the MLS. The MLS shares it through all of the resources. And then basically someone at, I don't know, Keller Williams has it on their website. And when you click on that link, this person's name shows up on the pictures. That that is not allowed. The reason why is because we have a co-listing agreement with other agents. And so when you do that, it's like what do we call it? Steering. It's like you're steering the client towards doing something versus doing something else. So that's why they're very careful about, don't add any more information, make it as basic as you can, because you don't want them, you don't want the client to go to a different website. And it's kind of the same principle.
Yvette, what you
I
can
actually
do,
thought that broker remark was for the realtor to know the next step. I didn't
Again,
realize that it
yeah,
was for
agreed.
the end
Agree,
user.
but it's, yeah.
No, I get it, I
but
get
it's
it.
the same,
I-
but
it
it's the
was a
same idea.
painful
It's the same
lesson.
principle.
in the
Yeah, it's the same-
future, Yvette,
it's
you could say, see attachments and attach the application or attach, and which has that
Beautiful.
information on it. So.
Oh,
put-
I never
Beautiful.
saw,
That's your,
I don't know how to attach it. That's what, I didn't see
So-
okay,
so
anything.
when
on
you're
it-
putting in your listing, you know how you add photos?
Yes,
Okay, in that same function, there is an additional one that says add a floor plan, add
Attachments.
attachments. And you can,
oh, okay.
you can add a floor plan,
You can
add
put
an
the
attachment.
application there, you can put the rules and regulations of the building under attachments.
The
and then in your broker,
financials, yeah.
Everything.
Wait, you said the rules and regulations, what, the financials?
The
Anything,
application for a
anything you wanna-
rental,
yeah.
you don't need that, but for your listing, you would need
Right.
that. You can put all that information. You can put, and on the application, they usually have the contact for the HOA at the top of the letterhead on the application. So therefore you
Yep.
can list that,
Under
see attachments. And it looks
Okay.
like on your board above, it just looks like 3 or 4 pages and you tap on it. So when you go to a listing, you'll see if they have attachments, just the 3 little pieces of paper are the attachments. Tap on that. If it says see attachments, that's where that other information is. So
Yeah.
next time.
So just be wary of it. And then someone just asked, what is it that she did wrong? In the broker remarks, she added information on how to go directly to the association in order to do
Or website.
a credit check.
Link.
So
Link.
that's something you don't want to do. You know, that's not what the intention is. Bueno.
Yeah,
All right, guys.
yeah, I had
super
to share
cool.
because
Thanks,
I'm
guys.
telling you, I was so, when I got there, I was like, $500.
No, yeah. Yeah,
Good to
and
know.
usually,
Thank you.
that, you wanna make sure that you're just careful what you put in, and you're professional about it. And again, I always tell you about photographs. It's just one of those things where people are like, oh, I'm being slick. Don't try to be slick. Don't try to lead clients over to yourself. And yours was in good intentions,
Mhm.
but a lot of agents, they do it because they don't have the best of intentions. So
Gotcha.
but bueno, that being said, we're gonna go ahead and close this
care.
down. Again, I'm gonna keep this open, and I'll start at noon with the London Foster 101. So if there's anyone who is not a London Foster agent, I invite you to stay on. You'll be able to learn all about the firm. And if some of you who are London Foster agents that have not done it in a while, I welcome you to participate. It's a lot of fun, and we get to review some of the basics of London Foster.